In 1888, 3 London Freemasons founded an order on the authority of a manuscript that contained a mistake nobody alive in its supposed century could have made. They called it the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. It lasted 12 years before it tore itself apart in a London courtroom. In those 12 years, it did something no occult society before or since has managed. It took kabbalah, tarot, astrology, alchemy, and ceremonial magic, separate traditions in separate languages argued over for centuries, and welded them into one course of study with grades, examinations, and a syllabus. Almost everything sold today as Western esoteric practice runs on that welding, and most of it does not know where the design came from. And the document that authorized the whole thing gives itself away in a single detail. Start with what is not in dispute. On the 1st of March, 1888, a warrant was signed in London chartering a temple called Isis Urania. The 3 signatures belonged to William Wynne Westcott, William Robert Woodman, and Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers. Westcott was a physician and a coroner for the City of London. Woodman was also a physician, and by then an old man. Mathers was neither. He had no profession and no money, and he spent his days in the reading room of the British Museum copying magical manuscripts by hand. All 3 were Freemasons. All 3 belonged to a smaller society called the Societas Rosicruciana in Anglia, which admitted only master masons and therefore only men. The Golden Dawn broke that immediately. Its own documents say women were admitted in perfect equality with men, not as guests, not in a parallel branch, the same grades, the same examinations, the same rituals. The first person initiated into Isis Urania in March of 1888 was a woman. Mina Bergson, an art student, sister of the philosopher Henry Bergson, later married to Mathers and known afterwards as Moina. For a Victorian secret society, that is the single most radical thing in the whole story, and it is the part nobody argues about, now the part that is disputed, all of it. The order's founding papers are known as the Cipher Manuscripts, around 60 folios, written in black ink, in a substitution cipher taken from a system published by the German abbot Johannes Trithemius in the 16th century. The cipher is not difficult, and that matters more than it sounds. A document meant to stay hidden does not use a cipher printed in a book any educated man in Europe could consult. Decoded, the folios contain the skeletons of 5 rituals and the outline of a grade system, not finished ceremonies, sketches, bones with the flesh missing. The papers reached Westcott through a clergyman named A.F.A. Woodford. By September of 1887, Westcott had them decoded. How Woodford got them is where the versions start. The story that circulates is that he found them on a second-hand bookstall on Wellington Road. Another account traces them back through the collection of Kenneth Mackenzie, an occultist who had died the year before. No record settles it. Here's the thing people expect to be the catch, and it is not. The paper itself is genuine. It is cotton paper, and it carries a watermark dated 1809. The paper is old. The paper was never the problem. The problem is what the writing on it knows. The manuscripts lean on Egyptian material. Gods, funerary imagery, formulas drawn from the collection of texts we now call the Egyptian Book of the Dead. For most of recorded history, nobody could read a word of that. Hieroglyphs were silent for roughly 1400 years. Europe looked at them and guessed. That ended with the decipherment built on the Rosetta Stone in the 1820s, and the funerary texts specifically were not published in translation until 1842. So a manuscript on paper watermarked 1809, presenting itself as the deposit of a much older tradition, is quoting a body of material that no living person could read until decades after that paper was made. That is not a matter of interpretation. It is a date sitting on top of another date. The rituals in those folios were composed in the 19th century by someone who had read the New Egyptology. Whoever wrote them was not preserving a secret. They were making one, which raises the obvious question. If the papers were written by someone close at hand, who signed off on them? The answer was a letter from Germany. In October of 1887, Westcott said he had written to an address found inside the decoded manuscripts. It belonged, he said, to a German adept named Anna Sprengel, a Rosicrucian of high grade and the living authority behind the papers. She wrote back, she approved. She granted Westcott and Mathers the authority to open a temple in England. And with that, the order had what every occult society of the period needed most, a lineage that came from somewhere else. In 1890, the correspondence stopped. Anna Sprengel, Westcott reported, had died. Historians who have gone through the surviving material do not believe she existed. Ellick Howe worked through the order's paper trail in detail. Ronald Decker and Michael Dummett argued that the single-page naming Sprengel was not part of the original manuscripts at all. Their reasons are the kind a forger cannot fix afterwards. There is no independent trace of her anywhere in Germany, and the German in the letters reads like German written by someone whose first language was not German, down to grammatical forms a native writer would not produce. No record of her, and letters that do not sound like her language. The charter that founded the most influential order in modern magic came from a woman who left nothing behind but permission. And here is what makes the story worth 20 minutes instead of 2. What they built on that permission worked. A false lineage and a real system are not the same object. By 1888, the material Mathers was copying in the British Museum had one thing in common. None of it agreed with any of the rest. Kabbalistic diagrams from one century, tarot from another with no fixed order. Astrological attributions that contradicted each other by author. A person could spend a lifetime reading and end up with a heap. What Mathers did was force it onto one frame. He took the tree of life, 10 positions and the paths between them, and used it as a filing system. Every card, every planet, every element, and every Hebrew letter was assigned a place on it. Whether the assignments are true is a separate argument, and people have had it for 130 years. What is not arguable is that it was usable. The material could be taught in sequence, each stage assuming the one before it, and a syllabus needs grades. That is where the story turns, because the grades are where the order eventually broke, and it broke on one rung in particular. The outer order had 5 grades, and they were built on the elements. You enter as Neophyte. The notation is 0 equals 0, and the zeros are exact. No element yet, no work begun. It is the grade of being shown the room. Then Zelator, 1 equals 10, earth. Then Theoricus, 2 equals 9, air. Then Practicus, 3 equals 8, water. Then Philosophus, 4 equals 7, fire. The pairs of numbers are positions on that tree of life diagram counted from opposite ends. As the first number climbs, the second falls. You are not adding grades. You are moving up one ladder and down another at the same time. Each grade came with material to learn and an examination to pass. Hebrew alphabet, astrological symbols, the tarot attributions, geomancy, the tables of correspondences that make up most of what is sold today as occult reference. That is worth sitting with. A secret society in the 1890s that made you sit an exam, and then the ladder stops. After Philosophus, there is nothing. Not a further grade, a gap deliberately left, with no way across it advertised anywhere in the outer order. The gap had a name, members called it the portal. Cross it and you entered the second order, which Mathers called the Rossi Ruby et Ori Crucis, the ruby rose and golden cross. The grades there are Adeptus Minor, 5 equals 6, Adeptus Major, 6 equals 5, Adeptus Exemptus, 7 equals 4. Almost nobody went past the first of them. 5 equals 6 is where the whole society actually lived. The distinction between the outer order and that grade is the one the whole system is built on. Everything below it is study. You learn the symbols, you sit the examination, you show that you know what the material says. At 5 equals 6, you stop studying and start operating. That is the grade where the practical work is handed over, the ritual instructions, the consecrations, the material the outer order is told exists and is not shown. The ceremony for it was held inside a 7-sided chamber the order had built and furnished, standing for the tomb of the founder of Rosicrucian legend. So 5 equals 6 is not one rank among 8. It is the door between knowing about it and doing it. Which is exactly why every fight in the Order's history was a fight about who controlled that door. Before the fight's one detour, it pays for itself. An order this obsessed with secrecy left behind one of the best documented membership rolls in the history of Western occultism. Names, dates of initiation, grades reached, resignations. It survives. The famous members are real. William Butler Yeats, who would take the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1923. Florence Farr, the actress, Annie Horniman, who funded theaters, Arthur Machen, Algernon Blackwood, Maud Gonne, Evelyn Underhill, Aleister Crowley briefly and badly, and because the role survives it can be used the other way to check who was not there. Bram Stoker is named as a member in documentaries, in popular books, and in a great many videos on this subject. He was not one. A confidential list of members running up to 1905 does not contain him, as the scholar George M. Harper pointed out, and Stoker's own great-nephew Daniel Farson rejected the claim in his biography of him. Arthur Conan Doyle is attached to the order by the same root, and so is H.P. Lovecraft. Neither claim has anything behind it. Notice what that means. The secret society is easier to check than the rumor about it. The paperwork is right there. The order ran for 9 years without a public scandal. Then a cab. In 1897, papers belonging to Westcott, magical papers, carrying his name and his address, were left in a cab in London and found their way to the authorities. Westcott, remember, was a coroner of the Crown. He was given to understand that a man who ruled on the causes of deaths could not also be publicly known as a practicing magician. He resigned every office he held in the order. Florence Farr took over as chief adept in Anglia in his place. Nobody has ever established how the papers came to be in that cab. What it did was clear the field. Woodman had died in 1891. Westcott was out. Mathers in Paris was now the sole surviving founder and the sole authority over the Second Order, over that door at 5=6. Everything else in this story follows from that, and there is a second thing which I will come back to because it is the reason you can read any of this at all. The break came over an initiation. In 1898, a young man named Aleister Crowley joined. He moved through the outer grades fast. When he applied for 5=6, that door, the London officers refused him. Their reasons were about character. Mathers overruled them from Paris. On the 16th of January 1900, he initiated Crowley as Adeptus Minor himself at the Ahathor Temple in Paris. London read that correctly. If the head of the order could hand out that grade over the objection of the temple that had to work with the man, the examinations meant nothing. They asked Mathers for his evidence about the Sprengel letters. He refused and dismissed the London temple. On the 29th of March 1900, the London adepts voted to remove him as chief. 3 weeks later, on the 19th of April, Crowley went to the order's rooms at 36 Blythe Road to seize the premises and the vault on Mathers' behalf. The account that survives is largely his own, and in it he arrives in Highland dress and a black mask. The police were called. It went to court. The court found for the London side, who were, among other things, the ones paying the rent. A magistrate decided who ran a secret society. An order that survives on the claim of unbroken authority cannot survive a public ruling about who holds it. Within about 3 years, the Golden Dawn was 3 orders. Mathers kept his faction, renamed in time as the Alpha et Omega, and ran it from Paris until his death in 1918. Robert Felkin took a large part of the London membership into the Stella Matutina. Arthur Edward Waite kept the Isis Urania name and turned the work in a mystical direction, away from ceremonial magic. Every one of them claimed continuity. None of them could produce the German adept. Yeats stayed for years, and the material stayed in his poems for life. Crowley left to build his own on a foundation taken from this one. You would expect a broken society to disappear. 12 years, a courtroom, 3 splinters, a founding document with a date problem in it. Instead, its fingerprints are on nearly everything that came after, and on at least one object that is probably in this room. In 1909, the London publisher William Ryder and Son put out a tarot deck. It was designed under the direction of Arthur Edward Waite and drawn by an artist named Pamela Colman Smith. Waite you have already met. He kept the Isis Urania name after the split. Smith had joined the Golden Dawn in 1901, introduced by Yeats. Both were working from the Order's system of correspondences. That is what fixed the deck structure, and Smith did something to the minor cards that had not been done in a mass-produced deck before. Instead of showing 5 cups as 5 cups, she drew a scene on every one, a figure, a situation, something happening. That is why a modern reader can look at a card they have never studied and say something about it. The picture carries the meaning without the system underneath. That deck is the most reproduced tarot deck in the world. Almost every deck sold today is that design, a redrawing of it, or a deliberate argument with it. An order that could not survive its own arguments quietly set the visual grammar that the entire modern practice still uses. But the deck was public. The rest of it was sworn secret, under oath, on penalty of expulsion. So why can you buy that too? Because of a man named Israel Regardie. Regardie was a member of the Stella Matutina, one of the successor orders. Between 1937 and 1940, he published the order's material in 4 volumes: rituals, grade ceremonies, the correspondences, the examinations, the practical instruction. The syllabus in print for anyone with the price of the books. His argument was that the orders were dying and taking the system with them, and that a tradition kept behind an oath by people who had stopped teaching it would simply end. Members called it a betrayal. He had sworn the same oath they had. The counter-argument is that he is the reason there is anything left to be loyal to. You do not have to settle that to use what follows from it. The book has never gone out of print. What was worth a courtroom fight in 1900 is now a paperback, which gives you one question to carry, and it is the practical thing this video is for. Any group offering you initiation into this tradition today, and there are many, some serious, some renting a name, can be asked one thing. What do you teach that is not in Regardie? A working order answers concretely. Supervision, a functioning temple, correction of your practice, material developed since. An order with nothing gives one of 2 responses: silence or the claim that it can only be revealed to the initiated. That second answer is the sound of an empty vault, and it is the oldest sound in the story. There is one more thing they left, and most people who use it have no idea whose it is. The banishing ritual of the pentagram, the piece of practice that turns up in almost every modern book on magic, in 100 versions, is a Golden Dawn form. It went out through Regardie's volumes and through the splinter orders, and it kept going. That is the shape of the legacy, not a secret handed down. A structure assembled in the 1880s by a handful of Victorians, given a false ancestry to make it respectable, taught for 12 years, broken in public, and then copied by everyone. The order needed a German countess to feel entitled to teach. It did not need her in order to teach, which is a strange kind of comfort for anyone who has ever felt shut out of this subject. The lineage was the part that was invented. The syllabus was the part that was real. The order lasted 12 years. Its lineage was invented, its founders stopped speaking, and its final argument was settled by a magistrate. What outlived all of it was the one thing that had actually been theirs, the syllabus. It is on a shelf. It has been on a shelf since 1937. So here is what I want in the comments. What is the first thing you were told was only for initiates and then found already published, sitting in the open? Name it. I read them.